You think you just decided to watch this video. You felt the choice. You felt the moment your finger moved, your eyes settled, your attention locked in. It felt deliberate. It felt like you. But what if that feeling is the last thing that happens, not the first? What if your brain had already decided before you even knew you were deciding? This isn't philosophy. This isn't a thought experiment. This is something that was measured, recorded, and repeated in a laboratory. And when the scientists saw the results, they went very quiet. In 1983, a neuroscientist named Benjamin Libet sat people down in a chair, attached electrodes to their scalp, and asked them to do one simple thing: flex their wrist, whenever they felt like it. No instructions, no pressure, just whenever the urge arrived. There was a clock on the wall with a dot of light spinning around it. When they moved, they had to note where the dot was. That was the moment they decided. Libet then looked at the brain activity, and something was wrong. The brain had begun preparing the movement up to a full second before the person felt the urge to move. Before the conscious decision arrived, the brain was already in motion. The neurons were already firing. The signal was already traveling. The decision had been made. The person just hadn't been told yet. Libet called this early brain signal the readiness potential. Scientists today call it the bereitschaftspotential. But what it really is a crack in the story you've been telling yourself your entire life, because you have always believed that you are the author, that you sit at the center of your experience and you choose. You deliberate, you weigh, you decide. The thought comes first. The action follows. Libet's experiment suggested the opposite. The action begins first. Then the thought arrives to take the credit. Think about the last time you snapped at someone. Not planned, not calculated, just out. The words left your mouth before you'd finished thinking them. You felt it happen. And then you explained it to yourself afterward. He made me do it. I was tired. I didn't mean it. Your brain made the move. Your consciousness wrote the story. Libet himself struggled with what he'd found. He was not a nihilist. He didn't want to believe that everything you do is already determined before you experience it. So he looked for an escape. And he found something. Something small but important. Between the brain's preparation signal and the moment of action, there is a window, about 200 milliseconds. And in that window, Libet noticed something remarkable. People could stop themselves. They could feel the urge building and consciously veto it. Not initiate the action, but cancel it. He called this free won't instead of free will. You may not start the fire, but you can choose not to feed it. This idea quietly reshaped neuroscience, but the story didn't end there. In 2008, a team led by John Dylan Haynes at the Max Planck Institute in Berlin pushed Libet's experiment much further. They used an fMRI machine, a scanner that watches blood flow across entire regions of the brain in real time. They asked the same basic question: when do you decide? The results were more unsettling than anything Libet had found. Haynes and his team could predict which hand a person was going to move up to 10 seconds before the person consciously chose. 10 seconds, not milliseconds, not a fraction of a moment. 10 full seconds of neural activity that, when read by the scanner, told them exactly what was about to happen, while the person in the machine still believed they hadn't decided yet. Think about what 10 seconds means. In 10 seconds, you can read a sentence, change your mind, pour a glass of water, look out a window. 10 seconds is a long time to be living inside a decision that you don't know you've already made. The implications spread fast. Philosophers picked up the data and ran in opposite directions. Some said this proved hard determinism, that free will is an illusion, that every choice you have ever made was set in motion long before you were born, that the universe is just a very complicated series of dominoes. Others said the experiment proved nothing of the sort, that consciousness doesn't have to initiate action to be meaningful, that experience and intention still matter even if they arrive after the signal. But what everyone agreed on was this: your conscious mind is not the executive. It is the narrator, and the narrator is always slightly late. You already know this if you stop and pay attention. Think about catching something falling off a table. Your hand moves before you decide to move it. Think about laughing at a joke before you've processed why it's funny. Think about feeling afraid of something you haven't fully seen yet. Your body acts. Your mind explains. Sigmund Freud spent decades arguing that the unconscious mind was the real driver of human behavior, that everything you consciously believed about your motivations was mostly a polite story you told yourself. He was largely right about the architecture, even if wrong about many of the details. The neuroscience has now filled in what he could only infer. Most of what your brain does, it does without you. Roughly 95% of your cognitive activity is unconscious, not sleeping, not random, processing, pattern matching, predicting, regulating, reacting. The conscious mind you identify as yourself, the voice in your head reading these words right now, that voice is running on a tiny fraction of what's actually happening. This should terrify you. But here's the thing, it shouldn't. Because the unconscious mind is not a stranger. It is not some alien force hijacking your body. It is you. The older, faster, more experienced part of you. The part built over millions of years of evolution, refined by every experience you have ever had, shaped by every fear and every love and every lesson your nervous system has absorbed since before you had language. When your brain decides before you consciously choose, it is not betraying you. It is using everything it knows about you to move you forward as efficiently as possible. The question is not whether your conscious mind is in charge. It clearly is not always. The question is whether the system as a whole, you, the whole architecture, is moving in the direction you actually want to go. And that is where Libet's veto power becomes the most interesting thing he ever found. You may not be able to choose what arises, what thoughts surface, what urges build, what impulses your brain prepares. But in that small window, those milliseconds before the action completes, there is something that functions like a choice. A pause, a breath, a no. Every tradition that has ever tried to teach self-control has been teaching this exact thing without the language for it. Meditation is training the veto. So is therapy. So is counting to 10 before you speak. Every practice that inserts a gap between stimulus and response is working inside that 200 millisecond window. Viktor Frankl, writing from inside a concentration camp, said that between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space lies your freedom. He didn't have Libet's data, but he had arrived at the same place. The freedom is not in the initiating, it is in the interrupting. This changes how you should think about the choices you make every day. Not as grand acts of will emerging from a clear-eyed executive sitting at the top of your mind, but as small acts of noticing, catching the impulse, recognizing the pattern, choosing not to follow it automatically. Your ancestors survived not because they deliberated at every moment, but because their brains were fast, reactive, and deeply trained by experience. The conscious override was always the exception, not the rule. It was reserved for the moments that mattered most. You still live in that brain. That ancient, fast, reactive system is running you right now, this moment, just as it ran the person who first chipped a stone, who first buried their dead, who first looked at the sky and wondered what it meant. The difference is that now you know. And knowing, that small, strange, arriving too late act of knowing, might be the only real freedom you have. You thought you decided to watch this video? Maybe you did. Maybe something in the whole system that is you. Unconscious patterns, learned curiosity, a restless evening, a brain that had already begun to reach, made that decision long before the feeling of choosing arrived. But here you are, and you're still here. Maybe that's enough.